It's a great pleasure to introduce Professor Ravina as the final speaker in this three-part lecture series on the samurai. But first, I'd like to express my sincere gratitude for the opportunity to be involved with the exhibit of samurai-related items that have been on the display up on the first floor in the alcove, actually the third floor in the alcove for the last year. And I should mention that tomorrow will be, well, actually today, I think they're going to take down the items tomorrow, right? So today is their last day on display. So if you haven't had a chance to visit the exhibit, I'd encourage you to not waste any time. So my involvement with this exhibit has been one of the highlights of my time here at BYU. I'd like to thank the library for hosting the exhibit. Jack and I are especially thankful to Russ Taylor for his support of bringing more attention to this truly amazing collection, of which just a small portion is on display. Our Asian Studies, invaluable Asian Studies librarian, Gail King, was in many ways the driving force behind our preparations. And Eric Howard and Emily Ludlow's design work was simply superb, as I think you'll recognize. One of the best things about this experience for me was that it gave me the opportunity to work across interdisciplinary boundaries with my gifted Japan Studies colleague, Jack Stoneman. His knowledge of Japan and Japanese has amazed me since we first met in a seminar class during our first semester of grad school at Columbia a decade and a half ago, and I'm glad that we both ended up here at BYU. Finally, I am thankful that this exhibit enabled us to bring three distinguished historians of the early modern and medieval periods to share their research and experiences with us. In February, we heard from Luke Roberts of UC Santa Barbara, last month from Tom Conlon of Princeton, and in just a few moments from Dr. Mark Ravina. Professor Ravina is a professor of history at Emory University, where he has taught for nearly 25 years. A native of Queens, Dr. Ravina accompanied his musician father to Japan as a youngster, but only began to seriously study Japanese on a whim as an undergraduate at Columbia University. Subsequently, he earned his doctorate at Stanford University, studying under the direction of Peter Deuce and the late Jeffrey Mass. Dr. Ravina is a prolific scholar. His first book, Land and Lordship in Early Modern Japan, makes an important contribution to our understanding of the nature of the Tokugawa system. His idea that it resembled a federal union, what he calls a compound state, helps my students better understand the relationship between the shogunate and the domains. His next book, The Last Samurai, was a biography of one of the 19th century's most important and fascinating figures, Saigo Takamori. Saigo was the inspiration for the character Katsumoto in the Tom Cruise film, also entitled The Last Samurai, which was released the same year that the book was published. You don't have to know too much about Japanese history to recognize the flawed nature of the movie, even though it's highly entertaining. Fortunately, when movie fans went looking on Amazon for more information about Saigo, many of them ended up ordering Dr. Ravina's book, which gave them a more accurate and an equally engaging view of that history. So at least in this case, a historian got the last laugh. Currently, Dr. Ravina is completing a history of the Meiji Restoration for Oxford University Press entitled Japan's 19th Century, a transnational history of the Meiji Restoration. And today, in part inspired by his work on Saigo Takamori and the release of the film that year, he will be talking about recent depictions of samurai in Japanese films. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Ravina.
Aaron, thank you for that wonderful introduction. And Aaron, Jack, and Russ, congratulations on a really splendid exhibit. It's a real, it's a model of what a library can do to highlight a collection, to advance scholarship, to make it accessible to a broader audience. It's really wonderful. I didn't know what to expect. I always wonder if I should say it exceeds my expectations, because that somehow implies I had low expectations. But it's really remarkable. I did not know you had such a wonderful collection, and congratulations on displaying it so brilliantly. And thank you for the wonderful weather and a really wonderful visit so far. My talk today, Bushi after the bubble. Bushi, of course, is a term for samurai, for warrior. Actually came out of my last samurai book. And I began working on the biography of Saigo Takamori well before I knew anything about a Tom Cruise movie. And it was coincidence that I was almost finishing the biography when I heard about the Tom Cruise movie. But because of that coincidence, I became interested in samurai movies. I mean, first I wanted to take the opportunity to be the talking head explaining how the movie did or did not fit Japanese history. And once I did that and watched the movie and watched other movies, I found that a really interesting topic in its own right. How do the Japanese understand their past through samurai movies? How do Americans understand the Japanese past through samurai movies? How do they differ? What works? What doesn't? Why? So, let's see. Hopefully this clip will work. This is a brief, this is the trailer for The Last Samurai, and it pretty much summarizes the movie. So that's it. That tells you the whole movie. We're done. Someone at lunch asked me, do you like the movie? And I said, I have a really hard time with it because it's so well made that even as I cognitively dislike it, it's incredibly affecting. And I even watch it now, it's like, oh my goodness, Tom Cruise rises from the depths of the despair through his friendship with Katsumoto, played by Watanabe Ken, and comes to love life again. And I'm like, it's just great. It's not, it's really cliche. So it's not, but the cliches are so well done that I like them every time I watch the trailer. So Tom Cruise is an alcoholic, collapsing Civil War veteran. He's nominally a hero, but he's tortured by participating in a massacre of Cheyenne civilians. So that's why he's kind of this drunken lout when he's hired by the Japanese to train the new Meiji army. Out of the mists rides the primeval native heroic warrior Watanabe Ken, Katsumoto. Tom Cruise is captured. He's not killed because he's so brave. He is nursed back to health by Taka, played by the model Koyuki, who is incredibly beautiful, has no dialogue, but she became an actress through this movie. He discovers his inner warrior through swordplay with the samurai, who sort of adopt him as their pet, but come to love him as the noble white savior. He has discussions with Watanabe Ken, which, as one critic said, sound like Nathaniel Hawthorne read into the congressional record, but they talk about the meaning of life, and Tom Cruise says, what do you want? And Watanabe Ken says, what do you want for yourself? And Tom Cruise finds this deeply meaningful. He becomes so closely bonded to Watanabe Ken, who's Katsumoto, that when Meiji government assassins come to kill Watanabe Ken, Tom Cruise fights with them to save, or against them, to save Katsumoto, and then even leads a raid to liberate Watanabe Ken's allies who've been captured by the evil Meiji government. Then, and this is pre-300, pre the movie 300, Tom Cruise tells Watanabe Ken about the Battle of Thermopylae, where the Greeks lost, but they inflicted such heavy losses on the Persians that the Persians gave up. And he says, that's what we will do. So we will fight to the end and we will lose, but we will change the course of history. And they do a completely historically inaccurate suicide charge in a spectacular museum-quality collection of samurai armor into Gatling guns, which doesn't work very well. They fight. Fantastic battle scene, absolutely unbelievably, viscerally compelling, beautifully filmed, and one more clip. Okay, so the point of the movie is for the entire Japanese population to circle Tom Cruise and adore him. No, that's not it. And again, I've seen this now probably for the 25th time. I still find it viscerally affecting, even as I find it ridiculous. This is full of every Japanese cliche. The cherry blossoms, which as one person pointed out, are probably plum blossoms. But basically what you'll note here is Tom Cruise, Watanabe Ken, has just said, you have your honor back, because Tom Cruise has just killed the American officer who ordered him to massacre Cheyenne civilians. So he's recovered his honor. So Tom Cruise now repays this by helping Katsumoto commit some sort of quasi version of seppuku, traditional Japanese suicide. And then Tom Cruise survives, meets with the Meiji Emperor, tells them that Omura, who is commanding them to use the Gatling gun, is a villain, and Japan goes on to have this perfect fusion of Western technology and samurai spirit, thanks to America, I think. So I saw this, and then Tom Cruise goes on to live happily ever after with Taka, played by Koyuki, the model who became an actress, and plays with children. And you notice the final scene is him more playing with children. He really loves children in this movie. There he is. He's heroic and he lives forever in the Japanese mountains. So everyone expected the Japanese to hate this movie. And you can actually go through, in taking this apart, I actually compiled the genealogy of where this comes from. And the American reviewers were brutal. They said things like, this is Dances with Wolves on Nanfuji and Dances with Samurai. And what they were talking about is this genealogy, is that this is basically Dances with Wolves. Who knows that movie? Okay, all right. So Dances with Wolves, again, you could redo this genealogy, but Dances with Wolves is what happens when you combine Last of the Mohicans with A Man Called Horse. Last of the Mohicans is colonial captivity narratives crossbreeding with Ivanhoe. And I worked this through, but the common theme, and by the way, this was redone in outer space as Avatar. It's the same movie over and over again. And it was South Park that renamed Avatar Dances with Smurfs. Because they're blue. Now what you'll note here, the commonalities is some damaged adult white male warrior. He's just damaged somehow by the society he lives in. He has no inner peace. He somehow goes native. Maybe he's captured, but something happens and he goes into this native society that's under threat. Okay? And he makes friends with the natives and they adopt him as their own. But because he's a white man from outside, he's immediately the best at this native culture. So they pretty much make him chief. So he actually gets to save the native culture, all while, as one person pointed out, maintaining white male privilege. Go team. And he is repaired, he recovers his inner soul. So it's simultaneously, as people have pointed out, there's this patina of universalism to it. It's all very multicultural and wonderful. On the other hand, it's really very, very smug because all the sort of like natives are bit players. I mean, they're sort of like, you know, in Avatar, they're all CGI anyway, but they're sort of to be the second players, and this whole native culture wouldn't be interesting unless it were saved by the white man, but the white man's threatening it to begin with, so what are you talking about? And I could literally go on for an hour just having fun with the mix and match who in Avatar is who in The Last Samurai, is who in Dances with Wolves, and they match up with alarming accuracy. So this is all, as some people have pointed out, this is all just a really sort of kind of gross post-colonial fantasy. So the Japanese should have hated it. They loved it. They loved The Last Samurai. And I was asked over lunch, why did they love The Last Samurai? And I have a couple of reasons. One is it made great use of Japanese actors. So this was an incidental movie for Tom Cruise, breakthrough movie for Watanabe Ken. Fantastic. It's beautiful. Even though it's filmed in New Zealand, if Japan wants to look like New Zealand in that way. I mean, Japan wishes it were New Zealand. But what I want to talk about today is the way in which this actually pays homage to some classic samurai films. And in particular, this quote. This was one of the really positive Japanese movie reviews. And the author said, and this is in Kinema Junpo, like one of the big film journals. And he said, it's been so long since I've seen a great jidaigeki, a great period, a history drama. And in particular, since I've seen a great Chambara movie, and Chambara is a swordplay movie. And this really set me off. Said, why are the Japanese critics saying thank goodness an American made a good old-style samurai movie. What is he talking about? And this is my answer. So that was about a 20-minute lead-in, but this is my answer to that question. There were a whole series of movies beginning in around 99 and ending about 10 years later, but still dribbling out to today, that are what I have called post-bubble samurai movies. So there are samurai movies that are nominally samurai movies, but they're all actually writing against the genre. And I'll tell you what I mean in a minute. But the first was this one by Koizumi Takashi. It's supposedly based on a Kurosawa screenplay, but I think people have keep finding Kurosawa screenplays because everyone will see a Kurosawa movie. But this was a huge hit. Again, 8 Japan Academy Awards, Best Picture, Best Actor, Best Supporting Actress, international awards, huge hit. This is 99. Then Twilight Samurai, which I think you screened here at some point, 2002, by Yamada Yoji. Yamada Yoji just, had a huge career in the Otoko wa Tsurayo, the Torasan movies and TV show. There were 48 in that movie series. Unbelievably successful director. He turned his hand to samurai movies, okay? Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor, Best Actress, went to the Oscars as the Japanese bid, hugely successful. That's 2002. Hidden Blade, also Academy Award directions. Love and Honor, again by Yamada Yoji, did not get the Best Picture nomination, but was the most financially successful Shochiku film to date, 4 billion yen, and it wasn't expensive to make. Huge, huge success. So the commonalities in these films, and I'm talking fast because I really want to show you movie clips, but hopefully not too fast to understand. They emphasize family. These are all about samurai who love their families. And integrity involves intimate connections with your family. If you're not close to your family, your life isn't fulfilling. They have a sense of futility in their lives as samurai. They're not fulfilled in their lives as samurai. And that's why family is more important, because your samurai life is not fulfilling. Therefore, they reject worldly accomplishments. They don't want to do that much in the world. They kind of want to stay home and play with their children, because family is what really matters. And I can contrast this to the classic samurai, or even better, the Ronin film. The Ronin, of course, being a masterless samurai. So, emphasis on family. Are you kidding? Ronin don't have families. That's the definition of a Ronin, right? I'm on the road, I'm wandering, I'm kind of a lone gunman. Integrity involves intimate connections. No, Ronin flee intimacy like the plague. It's like, oh, a warm, fuzzy samurai. I think not. Sense futility in life as a samurai, yes, that's why I'm a Ronin, but there's no sense that, oh, I'm going to stay home and play with the children because I have a sense of futility as a samurai. That's kind of being a samurai, right? I can die at any moment. That's what it's about. Rejection of worldly accomplishments, well, not really, because being a solely, wandering force for justice is kind of lonely, but it's an accomplishment in its own right, and quiet family life is not. So these are all superficially samurai films that actually reject all the key messages of a traditional samurai film. And in that way, what was sort of disturbing for all these sort of samurai film buffs is you're sort of taking our genre and making it family friendly, and then this foreigner comes in and gives you an old style samurai movie, and you're like, that's great, that's what we've been waiting for. Now, what I want to note is that the cross-pollination, the way in which The Last Samurai was in so ways, it was Dances with Wolves remade, didn't bother critics at all. Did not bother critics at all, because a lot of them probably knew that this had been going on for a while. Does anyone recognize this scene? This is from the classic 61 film Yojimbo. I think it's Kurosawa's greatest film. You're supposed to say Seven Samurai, but this is generally ranked always in the top 10 of samurai films. I think it's the best. It was actually Kurosawa's financially most successful film ever, because The Seven Samurai took forever. It was over budget. The sets didn't work. The weather was bad. They almost went broke. I mean, it made money, but they just cranked out Yojimbo, and then they were like, we had no idea you could just sit down, make a film, and make a fortune. This is good, let's do this again. So his best box office ever. And let's see, this is 61 Yojimbo. This is My Darling Clementine from 1954. I don't know. Is there any similarity? Yes, there is. In fact, you know there is, because Kurosawa said, when I grow up, I want to be a filmmaker like John Ford. And so these movies have been cross-pollinating for a while. If any of you, many of you may or may not know this, but Fistful of Dollars was a remake of Yojimbo. So samurai movies and westerns have been cross-pollinating for a while. Samurai film buffs are like, fine, so it's a remake of a western. Why should we care? That doesn't make it a bad movie. So let me just go through in detail how these movies sort of subvert the old samurai trope. So in After the Rain, Ihei is a wandering ronin, but he wanders happily with his cheerful wife. Ronin don't do that, okay? He has no interest in fame, and he actually only duels occasionally to make enough money to live his happy vagabond life with his happy, cheerful wife, okay? In Twilight Samurai, Iguchi Seibei is a widower living with his two children and his senile mother. And he doesn't go out drinking with his colleagues after work. He's kind of solitary, which is why they call him Tasogata Seibei, sort of Twilight, kind of moody samurai. He rescues his sweetheart with a duel from her abusive husband. And then he defeats a master swordsman after a long discussion about how neither of them want to fight. It's actually a really bizarre scene, but it leads to a great duel. And then he lives happily ever after with his senile mother and his two children, because through a lot of twists of fate, he recovers his childhood sweetheart who he saved from an abusive husband. And the narrator says, despite poverty and despite dying soon after he was reunited with his childhood sweetheart in the Meiji Restoration, he had his children, he had his childhood sweetheart. He was never known as a master swordsman, but he was happy. And I'm like, are you kidding? This isn't a samurai movie. What is this? Hidden Blade, I'll skip because I want to show you some really cool clips. Love and Honor, again, the huge financial success. And I'm going to show you a clip from this. So Shinojo is a food taster, and he's a food taster to make sure his lord does not get poisoned. And there hasn't been a poisoning attempt on his lord in anyone's living memory. So he keeps talking about how stupid my life as a samurai is. Okay? He has an adoring, beautiful wife whom he does not appreciate. He goes blind, but it's not a poisoning. Someone had just accidentally served food out of season. And they sort of hint that it's maybe fugu or someone screwed up. The food is poisoned, the fish is poisoned if you catch it at the wrong time. He goes blind, so he's now in danger of being laid off. To foreshadow, you don't get laid off as a samurai. Samurai had hereditary stipends, okay? You couldn't get laid off. You basically had an income whether you had a job or not. So this is actually a 2006 issue written back to the 1700s or 1800s. Makes no sense at all. So this is totally a 21st century anxiety. I'm unfulfilled by my job, I might get laid off, written back onto samurai time. So the samurai movie is working out a 21st century problem. So his wife goes to the villainous Shimada Toyo, who's kind of the boss, and he says, I will get your husband a position. But then he rapes her, and Shinojo expels his wife because she is dishonored. He challenges Shimada to a duel even though he's blind. And, well, actually, you know what? I think I'll go to a clip. Here we are. Oh, this is perfect. I'll be able to show you clips and talk about them too. So, in fact, as the blind swordsman, okay, Love and Honor sort of mirrors a famous Zatoichi film. So what I want to show you is first the great sort of classic samurai film involving a blind swordsman, and then we'll go to how Love and Honor recapitulates that scene. So, and this is from the iconic Japanese blind swordsman film Zatoichi. Zatoichi is in this as sort of, he's a blind swordsman, and everyone says, oh, blind swordsman, we can, big deal. But he's like serves as a bodyguard because he's the most cunning blind swordsman ever. In this scene, it's a classic samurai trope. There are two master swordsmen who have chosen opposite sides in a fight, but what they really have is the kinship with each other. So, does anyone get the film quote? There's a powerful visual quote there. How does Master Hirate die? By his hand. In fact, so think about this. The final scene in The Last Samurai is almost, or not the final scene, but the Watanabe Ken death scene is a visual quote of this. It's like, I need to die by the hand of someone that's noble, right? It's an incredibly powerful scene, and Zatoichi is just, tearing up. This is his former enemy, right? But they're the only men worthy of each other, so that's the only bond that really matters. And if you need this driven home anymore, Zatoichi in town has, the barmaid who of course falls in love with him because he's Zatoichi. She says, I'll wait for you when you're leaving town. And the final scene is Zatoichi climbing a hill to avoid the main road, to avoid being with the beautiful barmaid who would love him forever, because the only real bond he can have is with another true warrior. So the way in which The Last Samurai really quotes this, it's Watanabe Ken and Tom Cruise. So film buffs are like, okay, this is just wonderful. You've hit the same samurai trope. Even if you're on the opposite side initially, if you're true warriors, you love each other more than any ordinary people could, or a samurai could, an ordinary person. So then we get to the duel in Love and Honor, which has another blind swordsman. If you're a Japanese film buff, you're saying blind swordsman. There's one classic Japanese blind swordsman. You've got to be quoting this, right? You're not. Not at all. Okay, what's wrong with this? I mean, you faked me out, right? You were going to give me a samurai movie. What happened here? This is all wrong, okay? So just think about this. Zatoichi is how you do it. An iconic samurai film. The Last Samurai reiterates it. What's going on here? First of all, for whom is he fighting? Yes, my wife's honor is avenged. Really? That's what you're fighting for? That's important? When did that become important? It's like the Ronin's wife's honor isn't important. In fact, you avoid women. I mean, you think of how many samurai films you have. I mean, when was Toshiro Mifune? It's like, oh, I really love my wife. No, you don't. You're not supposed to have a wife. You have this all wrong. Okay, so he's fighting to avenge his wife's honor, and then, right, he fights this duel, and then what does his second ask him? Are you going to finish him off? And what does he say? No, I've avenged my wife's honor. So think of the imbalance here. This is not through heroism. I meet my enemy as an equal, and our samurai valor unites us. This is, you attacked my wife, I therefore just want to humiliate you, and then my wife's honor is purged. I'm done with being a samurai. I'm done. In fact, this point is really driven home. There's a final scene here. Okay, what? When do samurai cry? When are samurai supposed to cry? When they meet another man who is their equal and one of them dies. Ideally killed by a samurai of equal valor. What is this? You've got to be kidding. Who put girls in my samurai movie? Wait a minute. This is all, Tokuhei's crying. What did the second is, so this is all wrong. I mean, for a true samurai fan, this is mind-bendingly wrong. Now, to be fair, and think about this, it's not like there's 150 famous blind swordsmen in Japan. There's one. So if you're doing a blind swordsman, everyone's thinking, will it be like Zatoichi? No. And again, why are there women? Why is the love interest important? So it's an unbelievably 21st century set of concerns put into this movie. And these may be obvious by now, and these may be obvious if I just called it post-bubble samurai. The Japanese economy has been sluggish basically since 89, 90, 91. People now talk about a generation-long recession. It's changed how people think, It's even changed how the government approaches the workforce. And just two fairly quick pointers on that. So, just a quote from a 2004 study, which is, right around when the Tom Cruise movie came out, but right? Men's discontent with their jobs is associated with their increasing emphasis on family life. Okay? Men who share childcare with their spouses are less likely to be satisfied with their current workplace environment. And Tsuchiya found that men who score high in their commitment to work are less involved in children's lives. So we predict that Japanese men, paternal involvement is negatively associated with a level of satisfaction in the workplace. So these movies are about what it's like to be a Japanese man in the 21st century. I don't like my job that much. I want to see my children grow up. This keeps coming up in these samurai movies. It's ridiculous as any kind of reflection on Japanese culture. Why did it get Academy Awards? Because it's about what men were struggling with when the movies came out in the early 21st century, which is something called work-life balance, which the Japanese government actually discovered a couple of years ago, and they now issue white papers on work-life balance. They have no idea what to do about it, but they sure talk about it a lot, which is a very Japanese government ministry thing to do. And this is a chart, again from 2003, people wishing to change employer by cohort. So young men, now of course, you may job around, but the idea of lifetime employment is gone among this younger generation. Lifetime employment to some degree resonates with this idea of loyalty to a single lord, superior person. You spend a lot of time at work, you're bonded with that group, it's all men, that's important, it's fulfilling. Well, forget it, it's over. In fact, if you're going to seek satisfaction, it's got to be someplace outside of the workplace. These films that were financially successful, got all these Academy Awards, really reflect that. They reflect the idea that Japanese men have different expectations on them as husbands, different expectations on them as fathers, and different expectations that they're putting on themselves. Now, again, these are historically terrible movies, but notice the shift. Okay? We now have samurai movies that are about samurai family men, which is really bizarre. And hence, again, the Tom Cruise movie is a huge hit, although, again, it fudges. Because in the end, Tom Cruise goes back to the happy village, samurai village in the mountains, and plays with the children. But the scenes with Taka are never as powerful as the scenes with Watanabe Ken. There's no crying. And the really remarkable one is, as some film critics pointed out, Taka is sort of this bit part. And in the scene that shows in the trailer, she puts his clothes on him to prepare him for battle. And someone said, this is the oddest sex scene ever. She's putting clothes on him instead of taking them off. So it's almost thrown in there gratuitously. And my guess is, and this is American movies and Tom Cruise movies, that intense male-male intimacy between Watanabe Ken and Tom Cruise set off what Hollywood people call gay panic. We don't know how to deal with intense male-male intimacy without saying, oh, that's got to be gay. And given that it's Tom Cruise, you really need quick put a girl in there so it's not gay. But what it basically movie is it recreates this intense male-male connection that was the high point of samurai films. It came out of an American studio. So a lot of Japanese critics said, we've been waiting for this. It's wonderful. We'll forgive the fact that it came out of an American studio, because guess what? These movies have been cross-pollinating for years. One final point on this for the film buffs. If you look at Toshiro Mifune, okay, in The Last Samurai, in The Seven Samurai, and in Yojimbo, you'll notice, okay, in The Seven Samurai, he's chatty and he's wacky, he's kind of a cut-up. After that, he became kind of this stoic. He'd crack lines, but he's kind of a stoic. He got that from John Wayne. Okay. Then Toshiro Mifune made it famous, and when Yojimbo was remade as Fistful of Dollars, it became Clint Eastwood's signature move. So film buffs were like, fine, cross-pollinate with Westerns all you want, just give us a good macho samurai movie. And so that is post-bubble samurai, samurai before and after 1989. Thank you for your attention.
think Dr. Ravina has brought our series to a wonderful conclusion by bringing samurai up to the present. We have some time for some questions. If you'd like to ask a question, we encourage you to come up to the microphone so that everybody can hear your question.
And I know you have classes at 3, so I take no offense.
Dr. Ravina, what is the future of samurai movies? Where are we going from here?
I'm not fully up to date. There has been one thing that actually hurts the genre is the Japanese film industry feels under pressure because there's decreasing box offices all around. And one thing people talked about in the Tom Cruise movie was, we can't do a big budget picture anymore because we just, it doesn't look as good compared to Hollywood because we just don't have the budget, we don't have the box office, and we're doing it like on backlots and filling it with CGI. And what they talked about the last summer is like, that was all those horses, that was just so beautiful. That's like, why can't we pull that off? So that's really sort of hurt that aspect of the genre. There is sort of a transformation of it, like how do we put in more, how do we put in more women? How do we bring it more up to date? So there's all this odd, female ninja stuff, and there's a lot of hybrid stuff that seems to work, like Samurai Champloo, which was an anime series, was absolutely fantastic, and it was sort of this bizarre hip-hop infused time-traveling samurai thing, and it worked great, and it picked up some of the tropes. But I think the traditional genre it's like the Western. You can try and revive it, but both between budget concerns and changing mores, it doesn't quite work anymore. So that's my guess at the future. Yes, sure.
Yeah. So the samurai, basic samurai tropes, those actually reflect the old samurai lifestyle and samurai history?
Doing samurai social history is really, tougher than you might think. These weren't people who wrote about their feelings a lot. There are some, but there are some that are sort of more sort of historically grounded. And this idea that you sort of with a 21st century sentimentality say, I want to spend a lot of time with my family is just bizarre. Okay, so that's the thing that struck me the most. There are some Ronin films that really do, capture. What I like about Yojimbo is it does sort of capture sort of like a dangerous Ronin in the Bakumatsu period. And even though it's pulled out of Westerns, it sort of like marvelously captures a sense of a society and tradition, a little bit nihilistic. So that's really marvelous. And then there's just some that are just fun, like Mito Komon, really loosely based on Tokugawa history, but mostly just fun. But let me put it this way. These, with their sentimentality and their 21st century attitudes, raise historical inaccuracy to a completely new level out of that. And the presentism of them is striking. So. Oh, yeah, sure. Yes. I'm going to argue, and this is based on, I don't think there's audience surveys from the 1950s and 60s. I don't think there's demographic data, but I'm going to go by something that I read in a movie journal, that this was predominantly a male audience. And this is basically, based on a letter to a film journal, which said, my husband used to tell me I had to watch these samurai movies with him, and I did at the time to humor him, and now I came to love them, so I watched them on my own. But I think it is sort of more of a male genre. And I think it was pitched at men, which makes these so striking, because these win two ways. First, the men will watch them, and then you get the crossover, because it's got beautiful women in important roles, and it hits on family life, so it works both ways.
I was just curious, what was the film that was the last year of the classic samurai, what film was it?
Oh, let me think. What would be the last classic film? I think a lot of people would say, the genre, the heyday of the genre ends in the late 60s. I think I have, hold on, I even have a slide for that. So this is from the 2004 Kinema Junpo, the big Japanese film journal. And I've checked, they haven't redone this since. This is their top 20 samurai films. So you'll see Yojimbo, my favorite, is number 10. Seven Samurai is number 1. There's a bunch in here. A lot of the Miyamoto Musashis are not easily available in the US or with subtitles. They're just not. Tale of Zatoichi is number 3. Right? So that's way up there. So when you put in A Blind Swordsman, it's like it's the number 3 samurai film of all time. You've got to be, right? And then, just nicking it, Twilight Samurai, the first of the Yamada Yoji series, 2002. And yep, I'll say, see, there's a gap. It's basically a 50s, 60s genre that gets a comeback in 2002. And when it's sort of reawakened, all of a sudden it has like girly sentimentality. I mean, people just, and you can see The Last Samurai coming out at the same time as this new wave of Japanese samurai films is coming out. The sort of the disconnect was sort of striking, that the Tom Cruise film was more like an old samurai film than the Japanese new, what was my title? Post-bubble samurai. So, yes.
So I've seen Zatoichi and Yojimbo, but I've heard about Zatoichi meets Yojimbo. Is that more of an old style or not really?
I haven't seen that one, and there's a couple in here that are really hard to find. I mean, Rashomon's easy to get, Sanjiro's easy to get. Humanity in Paper Balloons is a striking one. Although I will say, it is not a movie to watch alone, and you may not it will destroy your faith in human life. It's the bleakest. It's one of the bleakest films ever made. It's a dark samurai film made by a communist filmmaker who is about to be drafted and sent to the South Pacific, where he promptly died. And it's made in 1937. It's just so, but it's an amazing film. But it's really like, what's the point? I mean, if you can get up the next morning and put your shoes on, you're really a powerful soul. It's so dark. No, I haven't seen Zatoichi versus Yojimbo either. And you'll notice Yamanaka Sadao has 2 in here. And he was a group of, again, basically communist filmmakers struggling in the 1930s not to be censored or put to jail. So they went back to samurai movies to do protest films. Although The Million Ryo Pond is supposed to be rather lighthearted, it's on my list. But some of these are hard to find here. And it's not like they're that popular that they're on BitTorrent or something. So it's not even a question of morality. It's a question of pure accessibility. So. And you'll notice that this one, Kukake Tokujiro Yukyo Ippiki, doesn't even have an English title. So I doubt that you're going to find that. Yeah, you've got to get a Japanese friend to get that for you. And I think yeah, Yojimbo versus Zatoichi is not on here. Jusan nin no Shikaku, the 13 Assassins. There was recently a remake of that. And that was actually a good example of this problem of trying to do it on a smaller budget. Because it really looks like, it was a big deal. We're redoing a remake of the 13 Assassins. And it really looks a little bit like, sort of like a made-for-TV movie. It really looks like, what is this, an episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer? It does not have like because Hollywood can pour $100 million into anything. And $100 million is a lot for a Japanese film. So again, one of the things that came up with The Last Samurai is, it's just, how wonderful is it that someone else is putting $100 million into our film tradition? So one of the comments was Tom Cruise at one point, unarmed, fights off 4 armed assassins. And one of the film critics said, pretty good, almost like a good samurai movie, too much movement in the hips. Not really fully up to standards, but gotta tell you, I'll take it. I will take it just for like my, just an appreciation of a good old samurai movie. Yes?
In The Last Samurai, so clearly Japanese people liked it. Did the fact that Tom bother anyone, or did they just ignore that concept?
It seemed to have gone right past them. And I think part of it, okay, was that they cast so many Japanese actors so well, and that to some degree, Watanabe Ken almost eclipsed Tom Cruise in it. Okay, they chose great actors. They made the career of several actors. And then I could go off on this literally for hours, the exact details of the casting. And they also marketed it brilliantly. They set up a meeting with Prime Minister Koizumi and Tom Cruise, a special screening. And they did it so well that when they asked who set this up, Koizumi's office said, wait, we don't know. Did we request this? Because Warner Brothers is brilliant. So it got all this great press in the paper, so brilliantly promoted, and Tom Cruise and Elvis did Tom Cruise and Elvis. Tom Cruise and Koizumi did rival Elvis imitations. Koizumi was known as the first Japanese prime minister to have a personality. So unbelievably brilliant PR campaign. So this is the criticism that the film got. Not that Tom Cruise is doing a Western and saving Japanese culture, but what the heck? Because remember, think when this movie was made, 2003. What's going on in world politics? Anybody? Ooh, yeah, the first Iraq War, the first invasion of Iraq. I mean, we're getting ready for the second or the third or the fourth, I forget which. I think it's 4.0. The first invasion of Iraq. And the huge question in Japan was, what should the Japanese self-defense forces do? So everyone in Japan, all the sort of criticism was, wait a minute, this is a movie to inspire a joint US-Japanese military action in Iraq. And they're like, this is some sort of sneaky right-wing movie, and that's why Tom Cruise is celebrating the samurai tradition, which they're trying to co-opt it again for a second round of Japanese militarism, and George Bush is behind this. And of course, then you look and say, no, Hershkowitz and Zwick, the producers, they're sort of standard Hollywood liberals. And besides, the movie was thought of well before any of this was an issue. But that was the criticism. And that was really interesting, to see that much press about that. The other one was, well, what's the almost final scene of the movie, right? What are the heroes doing? Okay, with primitive technology, they take on what? They ride out in museum quality armor, right, with swords against what? Yes, so they're fighting with indigenous technology against great power and superior technology, and they defeat it by the power of their honor, all right? So what was the pretext for the first invasion of Iraq? Anybody? Right, 9/11. Well, I mean, sort of, yes, weapons of mass destruction, but right, it was terrorist attacks, and the Japanese critics said, wait a minute, isn't a suicide charge into Gatling guns kind of like a terrorist attack? Isn't that like a suicide bomber? Are you criticizing suicide bomber? Are you validating suicide? So the Japanese critics were like, what are the contemporary politics of it? And it was a really strange debate that you couldn't imagine in the US, but it was not about what I saw, which is, this is a Western. Did not care. Did not care. Yeah, one more?
Well, unless there's another question. All right, so did you write the book?
I was about 3/4 of the way through a biography of Saigo Takamori when I found out that the film was coming out. And that involved, the film was completely independently conceived, but it is a fictional version of the life of Saigo Takamori who sort of becomes Watanabe Ken. And so I became the talking head I did something called History versus Hollywood. I did a whole bunch of CNN, NPR, things on what Japanese history is really like. But what heightened my interest in this question of, okay, this is wrong, he held the sword in the wrong hand. That's fine, but what really is important is not whether you got the details right, but why did you get the details wrong? I mean, you didn't just it's not that you don't care. You get different details wrong when you have a different political agenda or a different motivation. So what's fascinating about these 21st century samurai movies is not that they get the details wrong about samurai daily life, but that they get uniquely 21st century aspects of life historically wrongly written into a previous century, like getting worried about being laid off when you're a hereditary noble. That's not an anxiety any samurai ever had. I'm going to lose my hereditary job. It's a hereditary job. You can't get laid off. So.
All right. Thank you for all the great questions, and thank you for the both enlightening and entertaining lecture, Dr. Ravina.
Thank you. Thank you very much.